Now we are discussing about economic terms. In that today we are discussing about aggregate supply. What is aggregate supply? Aggregate supply is also known as total output, is the total supply of goods and services produced within an economy at a given overall price on a given period. What is the aggregate supply formula? Aggregate supply is the relationship between the price level and the production of the economy. In the short term, in the short run, the aggregate supply is graphed as an upward sloping curve. The short run aggregate supply equation is equal to y into um, alpha of P minus PE. What is the aggregate supply in short answer? Aggregate supply is the goods and services produced by an economy. It is driven by the four factors of production: labor, capital goods, natural resources, and entrepreneurships. These factors are enhanced by availability of financial capital. And the next point is, what are the three ranges of average aggregate supply? Aggregate supply curve showing the three ranges: Keynesian, intermediate, and classical. In the classical range, the economy is producing at full employment. And next point is, what are the two types of aggregate supply? In order to address this issue, it has become customary to distinguish between two types of aggregate supply curves: the short run aggregate supply curve and the long run aggregate supply curve. And the next point is, what is aggregate supply equal to income? Aggregate supply is always equal to national income because of the circular flow of income. According to the theory of the circular flow of income, the total amount of goods and services produced will always equal the monetary value of producing goods and services. And the next point is, why aggregate supply curve is vertical? The long run aggregate supply curve is vertical because in the long run, resource supply prices adjust to changes at the price level, which leaves no incentive for firms to change their output. In the long run, prices and wages have no effect on the aggregate supply curve. And next point is, what causes aggregate supply to decrease? Changes in input prices. If the cost of energy, wages, raw materials, or other kept input prices to manufacture and produce goods and services increases, aggregate supply will decrease, all else constant. Next point is, what does aggregate mean in economics? In an aggregate is a composite value measuring the result of economic activity. The main aggregate is GDP. Next point is, what is example of an aggregate? An aggregate is a collection of people who happen to be at the same place at the same time, but who have no other connection to one another. Example, the people gathered in a restaurant on a particular evening are an example of an aggregate, not group. This is the information regarding aggregate supply. These terms are most important in economics to understand the situations. Wishing you all the best.